Okay, this video is going to be the first in a series of shell scripting videos I'm going to put together that I think I'm going to call Shell Scripting 101. And the best place to start is, why do we even want to write scripts? And I'll tell you why I write scripts. I write scripts because I am lazy. And not just lazy in your I don't want to do anything sense of the word, but lazy in that I don't want to do repetitive tasks over and over again that I can get the computer to do for me. I like to consider it to be efficient. If I can make the computer do my work for me, then I don't have to do it. And then I can be doing other things while the computer's doing my work. So in order to demonstrate some of the ways I use scripts to allow me to increase my laziness factor, I'm going to go through some examples of some scripts I use to manage a system for a class I teach Linux in. And the first script is a script that I use to create new users every semester. So if you're unfamiliar with Linux, you have to add users with the user add command. So you can specify some extra stuff, like we have a special shell I give our users. So I need to specify the shell. I put a comment in there that says, this, something like this, and then that should have been -c. And then you put the username. So I'll create another user for me, just for an example, right? So I created the user. Right? Then I need to change the user's password. So now I set the user's password to something particular. So at this point, I'd have to go find that particular thing, copy it, come back and paste it. I screwed it up, so I have to paste it again. And there, I finally set the password. But that's not all I need to do. I also need to create some special users for a special directory for the user. Each user has their own directory and a special directory. So now I need to make that user's directory there. So I create a user. Well, now I need to make that user the owner of their directory. And I'll make their group the group of that directory with the same command. And then I want to make sure nobody else has access to that user's directory. And that's what I do for each user that I put on the system every semester. So a couple issues with this. One, it's a lot of mindless typing. There was no actual thinking that went along with this activity. Two, I had to remember where the directory goes and to set the permissions. And depending on how many steps you have in your process, you might have trouble remembering every 6 months that you do it what the process is. And three, it's just not very exciting work I want to be doing. So I wrote a script to add users to the system. And we'll look at that script to do that. So here's the script we have. First thing it does is it gets the list of users from the system. It gets the password out of the list of users, and then I do some stuff. Basically, I do those same things I just did. I add the user, I set the user's password, I make the user's directory, I change ownership on the user's directory, and I change the permissions on the user's directory so that they can get access. So I have a sample file just to show you how much more quickly this goes when I use my script. I created a class list 2 file. So now if I run my script, it is going to automatically pull the users out of my input file I created and do all those things for them. So if I run my script, we see that in less time than it took me to add one user, it added all the users. Now, is that a giant time savings this one time? No, it's probably saved me like 15 minutes this one time. But, like I said, it's not just about saving time. It's about not doing work I don't want to do. So that's one example of a script I use in class. Another example of a script I use in class, there's another process I have to do every semester when we get to the administration portion of the class. Basically, I have to go create cloned systems for everybody. So the way I do that without, did my VPN timeout? Oh, there you go. The way I do that without using a script is I use a stupid GUI and I go hit clone, and then I type in the name of the system I want to create, and I hit clone, and I sit here and wait for it. And sometimes I get distracted, and while I'm waiting, I go do something else and forget what I'm doing, and it eventually finishes, and then I come back and do what I need to do. So the problems with this, not very hard. Didn't take very long, but like I said, sometimes I get distracted. I also have to, when I'm doing it for the class, I don't just type in the name. I go find the name from where I need it, copy it, paste it into here. So it just takes a little time. So I found out there's a single command I can use to do that same process. Vert clone, blah, 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 default clone. I need an input file for that. I'm actually going to show you the whole process. So the input file, if I look at my old input file, you see the input file is just a list of CNT serve usernames. So I'll create my new input file. And the way I create my new input file is I get the first field when you use awk for that. I get the first field out of my input file, I use to create the users, which is for this semester. This is my input file for this semester. So I'll copy that. I'll go over here and paste it. Now I'll edit my script to point to the new input file. And now instead of having to type in each user individually as I create the users, I can just run the script, and now the computer is going to do the work for me. It's going to take the same amount of time, but now I just start it. It's going to go ahead and run and then create the clones for each machine. I can look over here and see on the GUI they're showing up. So now while this is running, I can go do something else. So another thing we need to do in this class that I need to do is we use a VPN server to connect to CNT serve later on so we can access the private network I have. So for that we use certificate-based authentication. I need to generate certificates for every user. Hopefully you're seeing a theme here that if I have to do something over and over again for every user, I don't want to do it by hand. There was a command, build key command. I have to specify the username, the email address. It was a lot of energy for me to do that for every user. So much energy to do that I didn't even go back and figure out what the actual command was to demonstrate it. But unsurprisingly, I've written a script to do that. So if we look at my genkeys.sh script, you see that same thing. I get a list of users from the input file. I need to go change that to be the new input file. I get a list of users from the input file. From the input file, I check to see if the key already exists. If it doesn't exist, I create it, set some variables, then I run this build key command, and then I copy the key and the certificate over to your directory, and then I change the owner to you. So again, same thing. This thing would have taken me like, a minute per user to do. Now I'm just going to go ahead and run it and hope it works as expected. So there we go. For each of the users in the class, it's creating the key for you. So that is far better use of my time than for me to sit here typing in all that work. There we go. It took less time to do all users than it would have taken for me to do one user by hand. So if we come back over here, look, we're still working on my we're still working on the cloning of the systems, but it's still running on its own without my intervention. So the last thing we'll do, last script I'll show you that I use is at the end of the semester I have to clean up the system to get ready for the next semester. So I have a script that, unsurprisingly, I would think, deletes users. So we look at the remove user script. I have this script that says, oh hey, for all the users that were in the class, go get rid of them. Get rid of the user, get rid of their test1 user, get rid of their home exercises directory that I created, get rid of the directories you created as you worked through the activities each semester. So that script is going to go ahead and run and get rid of all the users. I'm not going to run that one right now because I don't want to accidentally delete your user in the middle of the semester. But those are some ways that I use scripts to make my life easier. Pretty much for me, if it's a task I'm probably going to have to do more than once, I try to write a script for it instead of doing it by hand, just because one, I'm lazy, two, doing things by hand, you have a higher chance of having typos and errors, and three, it's just not a good use of my time. I'd much rather be doing something else. If I can make the computer do my work for me, then that's what I'm going to do. So hopefully that gave you a little insight into why you might want to write some scripts at some point if you become a Linux person. And yeah.